Cells are the foundation for all life forms. Birth, growth, development, death, and all life functions begin as a cellular process. But how did scientists discover cells? I will answer that question in today's video. Hi, and welcome back. Discovery of cells. Objectives: relate advances in microscope technology to discoveries about cells and cell structure. Compare the operation of a compound light microscope with that of an electron microscope. Identify the main ideas of the cell theory. The history of the cell theory. Before microscopes were invented, people believed the disease were caused by curses and supernatural spirits. They had no idea that organisms such as bacteria existed. As scientists began studying or using microscopes, they quickly realized they were entering a new world, one of microorganisms. Microscopes enable scientists to view and study cells, the basic units of living organisms. Light microscope. The microscope Anton van Leeuwenhoek used in the 1600s is considered a simple light microscope because it contained one lens and used light to view objects. And yes, what you observe in the photograph is a microscope. Over the next 200 years, scientists greatly improved microscopes by grinding higher quality lenses and developing the compound light microscope. Compound light microscopes use a series of lenses to magnify objects in steps. These microscopes can magnify objects up to about 1,500 times. The cell theory. Robert Hooke was an English scientist who lived at the same time as van Leeuwenhoek. Hooke used a compound light microscope to study cork, the dead cells of oak bark. In cork, Hooke observed small geometric shapes, like the ones you can see in the photograph. Hooke gave these box-shaped structures the name cells, because they remind him of the small rooms monks live in at a monastery. Cells are the basic units of all living things. In the 1830s, the German scientist Matthias Schleiden observed a variety of plants and concluded that all plants are composed of cells. Another German scientist, Theodor Schwann, made similar observations on animals. The observations and conclusions of these scientists are summarized as the cell theory, one of the fundamental ideas of modern biology. The cell theory is made up of three main ideas. 1. All organisms are composed of one or more cells. An organism may be single-celled, such as the organisms van Leeuwenhoek saw in the water. Others, like the plants and animals with you are most familiar, are multicellular or made up of many cells. 2. The cell is the basic unit of structure and organization of organisms. Although organisms such as humans, dogs, and trees can become very large and complex, the cell remains the simplest, most basic component of any organism. 3. All cells come from pre-existent cells. Before the cell theory, no one knew how cells were formed, where they came from, or what determined the type of cell they became. The cell theory states that a cell divides to form two identical cells. Electron microscope. In the 1930s and 1940s, a new type of microscope, the electron microscope, was developed. This microscope uses a beam of electrons instead of light to magnify structures up to 500,000 times their actual size. There are two basic types of electron microscopes. Scientists commonly use the scanning electron microscope, or SEM, to scan the surface of cells and to learn their three-dimensional shape. The transmission electron microscope, or TEM, allows scientists to study the structure contained within a cell. Two basic cell types. Cells can be divided in two broad groups: those that contain membrane-bound organelles and those that do not. Cells that do not contain any membrane-bound organelles are called prokaryotic cells. Most unicellular organisms, such as bacteria, do not have membrane-bound organelles and are therefore called prokaryotic. Cells of the other type, those containing membrane-bound organelles, are eukaryotic cells. Most of the multicellular organisms we know are made up of eukaryotic cells and are therefore called eukaryotics. It is important to know, however, that some eukaryotics, such as amoebas, algae, and yeast, are unicellular organisms. Now let's learn a little bit more about their difference. A prokaryotic cell does not have an internal organelle surrounded by a membrane. Most of prokaryotics' metabolism takes place in the cytoplasm. This eukaryotic cell for an animal has distinct membrane-bound organelles that allow different parts of the cell to perform different functions. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, bye!